Hello, I'm Kendra Cook, your host for the DCTV Daily News program out of Dove Creek, Colorado. It's brought to you by the Dolores County Broadcasting Network with support from the Southwest Colorado TV Translator Association. That's the special district association responsible for bringing the area free to access TV stations over the air by antenna. This is a community TV station, so if there's a news story or event information that you would like to see covered, please call us at 970-677-4119 and leave me a message. Or if your business or organization would like to find out more about sponsorship opportunities, again, call us at that number or email dcbnnews@gmail.com. And now, the Monday program for May 10th, 2021, DCTV Daily News. You may have considered a spring project of recent and found that if there is any wood lumber involved, your budget or projected cost has skyrocketed. The Journal Advocate provided an article to explain in their research what might be just happening. As rising lumber costs explode, the tab on new home construction DIY projects in Colorado were in a so-called pandemic brews perfect storm between supply shortage and boosted demand. The market experts say that the cost of lumber measured in 1,000-foot increments has tripled or more since last year, an unprecedented demand exacerbated by low inventory caused by the pandemic and a dim view of any improvement. When the restrictions of the pandemic kicked into gear in April and May of last year, the sawmills saw what was happening with whole sectors of the economy on pause, and they assumed the worst, flashing back to the crisis of 2005 through 2009, said Dustin Jalbert. He's an economist who specializes in the softwood lumber market at Fast Markets, an international commodity price reporter with offices in Massachusetts. The mills, quote, curtailed and cut production heavily, furloughed employees, and the slowdown in demand that was expected never happened, he said. We all expected there would be a cooling in the cost of new homes, the cost of renovation projects with higher contractor quotes, but we've just not seen it in the market, and it's non-stop, end quote. With one of the hottest housing markets in the country, driven harder by historic low interest rates, Colorado has been at the leading edge of a pricing boom that shows no pullback. Quote, home builders planned production accordingly, and then COVID-19 hit, said Allie Wolf, an economist at Zonda, a housing market research firm. At first, the housing market slowed to a crawl, but then something interesting happened. The combination of the lockdowns and more time spent at home made people realize they wanted to live in a home that met their evolving needs. By December 2020, new home contract sales were already 43% above the same period a year earlier, that according to Zonda's New Home Pending Sales Index. As a result, 86% of builders report major supply disruptions. Zonda data shows that with 96% of them reporting price increases in March and April, with the cost of lumber being the most critical component. Quote, lumber prices are up 250% compared to last year, Wolf said, which makes building a new home a whole lot more expensive and pushes prices up for the consumer. Some estimates, including from the National Association of Home Builders, put the added cost of a new construction residential home at nearly $36,000, and it's rising. Home construction was already at a high, and add to it more home rentals, and because people began to hate where they were living after seeing it for 24/7, that according to an economist, Elliot Eisenberg. And now, along with all of the building and remodeling, there are these outdoor huts being built to be socially distant compliant, and the demand for wood is going through the roof. The rate on a 30-year mortgage averages 3.04%, a drop of nearly 84% from the 1980s, Eisenberg noted. Conversely, today the price for 1,000 board feet of lumber hit a high of $1,300, when only a year ago it was about $328, he said. In 2009, it was just $163. Nothing is forever, and I don't think we'll see any reversal, he said. Although prices keep rising, the demand is moving right along with it, despite expectations otherwise. And also there were all those dividers with the plexiglass that had to have wood frames as well. The cost of housing is impacted by several factors that often are outside of a builder's control: land availability, labor shortages, and the price of lumber and other materials, said Ted Laity, CEO of the Colorado Association of Home Builders. When any of these costs increase, it makes it harder to provide enough attainably priced housing to meet our state's demand, and in turn prices hundreds of home buyers right out of the market. Laity said that there's been a press for legislators to help. In March, more than 36 associations and trade groups wrote U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo to, quote, examine the lumber supply chain and seek immediate remedies that will increase production, according to a copy of the letter. Quote, with better than expected housing demand and unprecedented activity by the do-it-yourself segment, builders are seeing shortages of lumber resulting in ever lengthening delivery delays. The letter notes that the potential for housing and construction to grow and lead the economy is limited as long as lumber remains expensive and scarce. Much of the supply problem isn't uniform across the country. The number of trees in the American South are just fine. It's the beetle and wildfire-ravaged forests of the Pacific Northwest, along with a Canadian sector burdened by heavy U.S. tariffs on their product that's beaten down the supply chain. The end game, Knowles said, isn't likely to show for at least the balance of this year, perhaps even longer. Economist Jalbert thinks the same, with, quote, positive demand surge and negative supply shock continuing. The looming ghost of the past housing crisis, so many of the lumber mills closed, and that gives everyone pause, a caution against capital expenditure needed to build new facilities to meet the demand, he said. The demand side has cooled. Mortgage rates tick up and push some homebuyers from the market. The crazy prices we're seeing will come off, but not likely return to the historic pre-pandemic average. And an end note that the overall agenda of UN 2030 and the Build Back Better construct you keep hearing about in the news is to end the individual choice in place of what of those who are an upper level of society deem best for the rest of us. How that ends up for rural locations is that they want the population off the land and into the cities. Once again, I'll reference the Hunger Games movie as an example of the impoverished districts versus the rich, high-end city capital. Looking all too familiar. A pathway towards their goals is to enforce the International Building Codes, the IBC, which condemn buildings in non-compliance. And that ranges from anywhere to the materials being used, to excess energy needed for the house, non-green solutions, to the level of your light switches on the walls not being at the IBC correct height for those with disabilities. And if you take those building codes and apply it to, say, Dove Creek, it's easy to see how those in power could condemn a whole town and incentivize moving the populace to a controlled city area. Already in response to the pandemic, you can see the unemployment continues to go up while businesses struggle to find employees to work. In part, that's due to the increase in payments to those not working and the extra money given to the population in dribs and drabs. Cheap incentives may be taken by much of the masses, but freedom is not free stuff. You'll have to make that decision on your own. So the lumber business is a great target to put building out of reach of those with less money. And the divide is ever increasing between the rich and the poor, the color wars, the masked or unmasked, etc., etc. But we still keep hope for the odds to remain ever in our favor. And now let's take a look at the odds for rain in our local weather forecast. Well, today a 10% chance for isolated showers and thunderstorms is possible in the early evening hours, partly sunny otherwise, and a high around 61 degrees. The east-northeast winds at 10 to 15 miles shift west-northwest by the afternoon, with gusts as high as 25 miles an hour. Into tonight, a low chance for some rains overnight, partly cloudy skies and a low down to 34 degrees. Also breezy with a north-northwest wind, 15 to 20 miles an hour, shifting east-northeast, 5 to 10 miles an hour. Into Tuesday, we're looking for a sunny day and a high near 61 degrees, with northwest winds at 10 to 15 miles an hour. Into Tuesday night, mostly clear, a low around 35 degrees, with northwest winds again making it feel a little cooler, 5 to 15 miles an hour, becoming east-northeast in the evening. And that looks like the last night for cold temperatures so far. So for those of you who have put your flowers in after Mother's Day or starting seeds, should look for some nice growth looking forward. Into Wednesday, we're looking for a sunny day and a high near 69, northeast winds 5 to 15 miles an hour, shifting west-northwest in the afternoon. For Wednesday night, mostly clear and a low around 40. Into Thursday, warming up even more, sunny and a high near 76 degrees. Thursday night, mostly clear and a low around 46. For Friday, sunny and a high near 79 degrees. Friday night, mostly clear, a low around 47, and Saturday, sunny again with a high near 78 degrees, breezy. Saturday night, partly cloudy, a low around 47, and remaining breezy. Though the temps should be better for the flower or veggie garden, beware of the winds continuing. Some delicate plants may need a windbreak to help as they strengthen up outside. And now, back to the news. The Community Voice announced they are now partners with Dolores County School District, writing, Quote, "You might have noticed some activity at the school garden. The Community Voice and the 7th Street Elementary teachers and students have partnered to bring an educational project back to the elementary school and provide fresh vegetables to the community for the summer and fall. Besides revitalizing the space, it is hoped that the garden will allow the elementary school students to take part in where and how food is produced, and to be able to consume the vegetables in the cafeteria at the end of the harvest. Resident team members are also working with the elementary school principal and teachers to bring this project into the science, art, and math classes. Teachers have agreed to add the garden into their science, math, and art classroom work and participate outside working to clean, plant, and harvest the produce. Coming to the end of school pretty soon here. The resident team members are working hard. The resident team is part of Community Voice. They're working hard to ready the beds and area for planting and bringing the garden back to life. Students will be able to plant and care for their garden until summer break and through the summer as much as possible. The vegetables produced will also be available to the community throughout the summer and into harvest. It has been several years since the garden was used. The idea came from the Community Voice wanting to provide a source of fresh vegetables to the community. The resident team from Community Voice first thought of using land in the industrial park for a 1 to 2 acre garden, and then thought an experimental garden might be the best place to start. When asked, the school district was excited that the space could become productive again. A grant was written through the Native Seed Program and received to provide some of the seeds that will be used. Within this grant, there is an opportunity to save seeds for next year, allowing the students another opportunity to continue the garden into the future. And that is if we have enough water, I guess, as well. A position for a garden manager has been advertised for those interested in being part of this project. Volunteers will also be welcome. If you would like to help with this project, please apply for the position or receive produce by calling 970-739-0073 or drop by the Community Voice offices at 115 South Gyrene in Dove Creek. That's just south of Carhart Feed and Seed. And keep your eyes open for the new plants and flowers that will be popping up in the beds and along the fence, they say. Forget the cow farts. The methane hotspot in the U.S. is right here in our region. Will a new methane rule have any impact on Four Corners hotspot? The Durango Herald reports on the U.S. Senate voting to reinstate EPA safeguards on potent emissions. They write, quote, "A former La Plata County commissioner and environmental conservationist said that the U.S. Senate's vote last month to reinstate Obama-era regulations on methane emissions is a step in the right direction to reducing the so-called methane hotspot that hangs over the Four Corners." In a 52-42 bipartisan vote, the Senate voted to undo the Trump administration's repeal of safeguards established by the EPA to regulate methane emissions from the oil and gas industry. The resolution, introduced under the Congressional Review Act, will be voted on by the U.S. House in the coming weeks. The Congressional Review Act allows Congress to reverse federal rules enacted in the last days of a previous presidential administration in an expedited manner that only requires a simple majority vote. Southwest Colorado is part of an area within the Four Corners that has long sat beneath a concentrated cloud of methane, a natural gas that is about 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide. In 2014, a NASA satellite image of atmospheric methane concentrations over the continental U.S. revealed a high concentration of methane emanating from the Four Corners. Quote, "We had long suspected that we had a huge methane emissions problem," said Gwen Lachelt, former La Plata County Commissioner. The NASA study that came out in 2014 that showed the methane cloud over our region just proved that we were correct. And that's from NASA. A subsequent study from NASA revealed that the hotspot was largely a result of leaks at gas facilities. The study ultimately identified 250 super emitters amongst a vast oil and gas complex, Lachelt said. "I'm talking about tens of thousands of oil and gas wells between northwestern New Mexico and southwestern Colorado." Lachelt served as a La Plata County Commissioner from 2013 until January of this year. She founded and is currently the executive director of the Western Leaders Network. That's a nonprofit consisting of 450 local and tribal officials in the interior West who support conservation policies. During her time as county commissioner, Lachelt worked on methane regulations at the state and the federal level, providing comments to Congress and testifying before a congressional committee on methane regulations. Colorado introduced the first state-level regulations on methane emissions and pollution in the oil and gas industry back in 2014. But methane emissions, like air pollution, doesn't stop at state lines, meaning less restrictive measures in a neighboring state can still adversely impact the states with stricter regulations. So in 2016, the Obama administration, on their way out, adopted regulations similar to those passed by Colorado that applied on a federal level after a bipartisan vote in Congress. We just thought that was a game changer to effectively address our methane cloud, Lachelt said of the first federal regulations of methane emissions. Lachelt was present for the vote in Congress. She visited the offices of senators who were considered swing votes to discuss the new rule, including John McCain, whom she had a chance to encounter with. McCain was one of the few Republicans who ended up voting for the federal regulations before his death. I can't take all the credit by any stretch of the imagination, but we've come a long way, and there's still a long way to go, Lachelt said. Oil and gas industry is an extremely powerful industry that has resisted reform or any regulation at all for a really, really long time, she says. Methane emissions, especially on federal lands, are an economic and taxpayer issue, not to mention an environmental and public health issue, Lachelt said. She likened methane leaks in oil and gas facilities to running faucets. I've said this for years and years and years. Methane or natural gas that stays in the pipeline is money in the bank. You're just throwing money out the door. We're just wasting it like you'd be wasting water like nobody's business if you left all your taps on. Congress's action on reinstating the EPA's safeguards on methane emissions is important, but it is not the end of the fight against methane emissions. Lachelt said that she would also like to see emissions regulations reinstated and strengthened by the Bureau of Land Management, as well as regulations at the state and local levels. Last Thursday, the New Mexico Environment Department proposed a new rule that would require oil and gas companies to detect and repair leaks, including methane leaks, that in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution. The department estimates the rule will reduce over 800 million pounds of methane annually. The Navajo Nation is also beginning to introduce regulations on tribal lands, said John Goldstein, the Environmental Defense Fund's Director of Regulatory and Legislative Affairs. It is the first tribe to regulate methane and air pollution from oil and gas wells. He added that there is much room to improve and strengthen regulations at the state level in Utah. Reinstating EPA safeguards will encourage more regulations at the state and local levels, such as those seen in Colorado, Goldstein said. The return to sensible federal standards is incredibly important, so we have a national floor and the continued leadership of states and tribes that can raise the bar even further, Goldstein said. I think that's exactly what you're seeing in the Four Corners, which is really exciting. And now if we could get China to comply with all these regulations as well, our whole atmosphere would be much better. And what's happening this week? Well, we're not psychic here, so if you have an event or notice or something going on that you'd like to share with our TV viewers, please contact me by email. It's dcbnnews@gmail.com, or call us at the station and leave me a message at 970-677-4119. And to catch the program online, visit our Facebook page. That's DCTV Daily News, or you can find it on YouTube as available. They are uploaded on both platforms. Thanks for tuning in to DCTV Daily News. And if you do like the program, please do like and follow us on Facebook and YouTube and share it with your friends and family. This has been a production of DCTV for the DCTV Daily News program out of Dove Creek, Colorado, USA. I'm Kendra Cook. Be well and keep thinking for yourself.